She fell into a human's trap and thought she'd be eaten alive until he tasted her another way. The storm had passed, but the cold bit down harder in its wake. The sky was pale, washed out, frozen in place. Among the towering trees and snow-covered pines, a small cabin stood stubborn against the isolation, and inside it lived a man who hadn't expected visitors of any kind. Caleb Mercer, 36, former geologist, former everything. After losing his wife in a climbing accident, he'd buried himself in Alaska's white vastness like a man accepting exile. He hadn't spoken to another soul in months, just wind, snow, and the sound of his own footsteps in the woods. That morning, like every morning, Caleb set out with a rifle on his back and a hatchet at his side. He was doing what he always did, checking his traps, but one of them had caught something impossible. From a distance, he saw the struggle, thought it was a moose snagged by the leg, but as he got closer, he stopped dead in his tracks. It wasn't an animal, and it wasn't human either. It was a girl, or close enough. She had the body of a young woman, but her skin was a vivid, glowing violet that seemed to swallow the light around it. Her hair, a darker shade of purple, clung to her in damp waves, stuck with snow. She was trembling, covered in shallow cuts, her eyes wide, pupils blown out like twin moons. Caleb froze, completely thrown. The creature, the girl, saw him and thrashed hard, tried to escape, but the steel trap was still clamped tight around her ankle. Then she screamed, not in English, not Russian, not in any earth language, but the emotion came through crystal clear, pure, blinding terror. She thought he was a predator. You're not real, Caleb whispered, more to himself than to her. The alien shrank back, though she couldn't go far. Her eyes darted wildly. Her breath came fast and sharp in the freezing air. Caleb dropped his rifle and raised his hand slowly. Hey, it's okay. I'm not going to hurt you. She said something through clenched teeth, a fast, strange language, soft and musical, with sound that seemed to both sing and snarl. Then, as if reaching across galaxies for the words, "No, eat me." Caleb blinked. What? You know, eat me? His eyes went wide. Then, a short, disbelieving laugh escaped him. You think I was going to eat you? She didn't answer, just stared, panting, vulnerable. No, God, no. He crouched carefully beside the trap. I'm not a cannibal, and I'm definitely not whatever you are. She watched him, cautious, still shaking, but she let him come closer. Caleb gently pulled the release mechanism and freed her ankle. She collapsed forward, and he caught her before she hit the ground. Her body, it was warm, unbelievably warm, like a sun caged beneath her skin. She was weak, unsteady, but when her face brushed his chest, Caleb felt something strange. It wasn't just fear, there was also shame, shyness, a shiver that didn't come from the cold. She looked up at him, trembling, said something again, so quiet he barely heard it. You not eat, but, Caleb echoed softly. She hesitated. Her violet cheeks darkened, as if she were blushing. He held her more securely. Snow drifted silently around them. Don't worry. Whatever you are, I just want to help you. And deep down he knew, this creature wasn't just from another world. She was the beginning of the end of his. Caleb carried the strange girl into the cabin in his arms. Snow thickened behind them, already erasing their footprints as the door closed with a slow, aching creak. The warmth of the fireplace hit them instantly, casting dancing shadows across the old wooden walls. He laid her carefully on the worn couch, tucking a wool blanket around her. Her skin looked less luminous now, but still hot, like living coals. Caleb couldn't tell if it was a fever, alien biology, or some kind of internal power. She was watching everything. Those violet eyes moved slowly, scanning the room like a trapped predator. There was intelligence there, deep intelligence. Caleb knelt in front of her, slow and steady. Do you understand anything I'm saying? She frowned, blinked, tried to speak, soft sounds, full of strange guttural tones, then something that sounded like an attempt. No, take hurt. I won't hurt you, he said gently, pointing to himself and then to her. Caleb. Me. Caleb. She hesitated, touched her chest with her fingertips, and murmured something that sounded like Zara. He repeated it. Zara. She blinked in surprise. A faint glow shimmered on her skin, like she approved of the way he said it. "Zara," Caleb smiled. "Nice to meet you." She looked at him for a long moment, then turned her gaze to the fire and curled in on herself. Her ankle was still hurt. The cut was shallow, but the blood was different, almost silver, glinting in the firelight. Caleb reached to clean it, but she flinched, pulling her leg back on instinct. He lifted his hands again. Okay, no touching." Zara was breathing hard, and she was trembling, not from the cold, but from exhaustion, fear, and something else. Caleb went to the cupboard, grabbed a blanket and a thermos. He heated up some broth. When he returned, Zara was eyeing him warily. "Food," he said, offering the cup. She hesitated, sniffed, then drank in small, tense sips. When she finished, her shoulders lowered slightly. The tightness in her body began to ease, unwinding from her neck to her collarbones. "Good," she murmured. "Yeah," Caleb replied. "Better than ending up as dinner, right?" Zara blinked, then said very slowly, "Eat." He chuckled. "Promise." But something was odd. Every time he said the word, "eat," she would look away, like she understood the double meaning, and got embarrassed. Caleb noticed, didn't mention it, but something inside him was shifting too, a warmth that wasn't from a fire. That night, the storm came crashing down on the world. Outside, the wind howled through the trees, as if the whole forest were alive. Snow slammed against the windows, and inside the cabin, wrapped in warm wood and firelight, two beings from different planets tried to understand how to exist in the same space. Zara was asleep, curled under the blanket. Caleb sat nearby in silence, watching the fire, his rifle leaning against the wall, not out of fear, just out of habit. She hadn't said much, but right before she drifted off, she'd murmured a phrase that kept echoing in his mind. "Not alone. They follow." They who? Others like her. Hunters? Soldiers? Predators? Caleb stared into the fire, uneasy. He could feel it in his bones. There was something much bigger behind all this. Zara wasn't just lost. She was running, and maybe they were coming after her. The next morning, the world looked like it had frozen over. The blizzard had blanketed everything in thick, muffling white, making the forest nearly unrecognizable. Caleb stood at the window, sipping coffee from a metal cup. Outside, nothing. No birds. No tracks. Just a frozen desert. But his instinct said otherwise. Something was out there. He turned slowly. Zara was still asleep on the couch, curled up like a wounded creature. During the night, she twitched in her sleep. Not quite nightmares. More like soft convulsions. Her eyes moved behind her lids. Her skin changed color, just slightly, like she was fighting something invisible. Caleb had stayed up, watching her, and thinking, why had she come here? Why alone? And more importantly, who, or what, was following her? Zara woke with a start. Her eyes snapped open, and the first thing she did was look for him. When she saw him, she relaxed. "Safe," she whispered. Caleb nodded. For now, while she ate, he started sketching shapes on the wooden floor with a piece of charcoal. He was trying to communicate. A planet, a meteor, a ship, a face. Zara pointed to the planet, then added 3 moons, then a triangle with lights at its corners. Caleb got it. She came from another system, and crash-landed here. "You fall." She shook her head. "Run." She ran. She was on the run. Then she drew another triangle, different from the first. This one had spikes and weapons. Then she pointed to herself, and then toward the outside of the cabin. "They come." Caleb clenched his jaw. "How many?" Zara hesitated, raised 4 slender fingers. But her eyes said more. They weren't like her. They were hunters. Later, while Caleb was stacking firewood on the side of the cabin, he saw something at the edge of the forest. Footprints, but not human, not animal either. 3 toes, deep grooves, heat traces still visible on the snow. He went back inside immediately, shut all the windows, locked the door, grabbed the shotgun, then looked at Zara. She understood. No words needed. "They closed," she said. "They tracked you here." She nodded, her eyes darkening. Her skin began to pulse in deeper shades. It wasn't just fear. It was alertness, instinct, training. If stay, you die. Caleb stepped closer. stopped in front of her, and replied firmly, "If I let you go out there alone, you'll die. So that makes us even." Zara went quiet. For the first time, her eyes lit up with something new. Respect, confusion, and affection. She said something in her language, soft, like a prayer, then stepped toward him. Her skin still radiated heat, her gaze steady, her face only inches from his. "You strange male," Caleb chuckled, even with danger knocking at the door. "You're a pretty unusual woman yourself." That night, Caleb kept watch, with Zara by his side. She had recovered enough to stand, and moved with a kind of lethal grace. Even wounded, there was something trained about her. The posture, the awareness. But there was something else, too. She was starting to trust him, and maybe he was starting to fear for her more than for himself. The sound started around 3 a.m. First, a long crack, like wood pushed beyond its limit. Then a high-pitched whine, electronic, unnatural. Definitely not from Earth. Zara woke before Caleb. She was already on her feet, eyes glowing, violet skin darkening to near black. Her whole body shifted into a combat stance he'd never seen before. She wasn't a fragile runaway anymore. She was a warrior, ready to die. "They hear." Caleb ran to the window. Outside, 3 figures moved through the snow. Tall, armed. Their armor shimmered under the moonlight, their eyes glowing like lanterns. They didn't knock. They didn't speak. They just kept coming, straight toward the cabin. Zara grabbed Caleb's arm. "You hide. I go. They stop if I—" "No," he cut her off. "You're not going anywhere." She tried to argue, but he lifted the shotgun and stepped between her and the door. "You think I'm going to let you walk out there with those bastards? After everything? After sleeping on my couch and silently judging my soup?" She frowned, unsure about the words, but the tone was crystal clear. "They kill you. Then let them try." Silence. Zara stared at him. Something cracked inside her, something old, something she never expected to see in a human. Sacrifice. She touched his chest, a hot, trembling hand, then leaned her forehead gently against his. "Why?" she whispered. "Because you don't deserve to die alone." Outside, the footsteps stopped. Caleb looked through the window and saw one of them was gone, no longer on the path. He stepped back. "They're going to try to breach from the back." Zara nodded. Without a word, she grabbed one of Caleb's hunting knives and took position near the side entrance. Even hurt, her stance was solid, precise. Caleb wondered, who was she before this? A soldier? A royal? A prisoner? He didn't have time to ask, because the wall exploded. One of the hunters smashed through the planks with a single hit. The creature was larger than Caleb, with jawlines like metal and unblinking eyes. Caleb fired. The shot grazed it. Zara leapt at the invader, driving the blade straight into the neck joint between 2 armor plates. The thing roared, slammed her against the wall, but she didn't fall. She shouted in her native tongue, a sound sharp and ancient, and tore something vital from inside it. The body hit the floor, twitched, and went still. Caleb rushed to her. Purple blood dripped from Zara's forehead, but she smiled. One. The second hunter smashed through the back window. Caleb spun around and fired the second shot. It hit center mass, but the creature kept coming. When it was just 6 feet away, Zara threw the knife. A perfect line, precise, straight into its eye. 2. But there was still the third. Caleb turned the gun. Empty. He reached for another shell, but didn't find one in time. The front door creaked open. Slowly, the third hunter stepped inside. Taller, heavily armed, and unlike the others, he spoke. "The fugitive will be retrieved. The protector will be neutralized." The voice was mechanical, emotionless. Zara stepped forward. Blood streamed down her face, but she stood tall. She raised one hand and spoke in her ancient tongue, a challenge. The hunter didn't hesitate. He raised his weapon. A blue light flared, and then Caleb jumped in front of it. The blast hit his shoulder. He screamed, slammed against the wall, smoke rising from his skin. Zara screamed, a sound like thunder. She launched herself at the third hunter with a fury that seemed to come from another world. They fought. The cabin shook. Wood splintered. Walls cracked. But she won. Caleb, wounded, saw the world spinning. Before blacking out, he felt Zara's warm hands on his face. She was saying something, crying. Then, darkness. If you've ever rooted for an impossible love, subscribe, because we've got more stories like this. Drop a comment. Would you risk your life for someone not even from your planet? Smoke still rose from the scorched wall. Snow blew in through holes in the roof. And Caleb's blood, warm, red, human, spread across the old wooden floor, soaking into the rug. Zara knelt beside him. Her skin still glowed in deep shades of violet and indigo. Her eyes shimmered with tears. Her lips trembled. She cupped his face in both hands. "No, stay, Caleb. Stay." He was barely conscious. His eyes struggled to focus. "You won." She nodded. He smiled faintly. "Good, purple girl." Zara squeezed her eyes shut, whispered something in her language, a kind of spell. Then, with hesitation, placed both hands over the wound on his shoulder. Where her hands touched, his skin briefly lit up. And for a moment, he screamed in pain. But it was different. Warm. Alive. Zara pulled back, panting. Caleb passed out. She collapsed to her knees, completely spent. Hours later, he woke to the pale gray light of dawn filtering through the broken roof. The cold was sharp, but he was alive. And the wound, once brutal, was now a dark mark. Almost healed. He looked around. Zara was curled beside him, asleep, her head resting on his chest. Her purple hair messy, her skin dimmer, less vibrant, as if the healing had drained something from her. Caleb ran his fingers gently through her hair. "You saved my life." She opened her eyes, slowly, as if hearing those words for the first time and not knowing how to respond. "You safe." He nodded. "Thanks to you." Zara sat up carefully, touched the scar, looked into his eyes, then quickly looked away, shy. "Not supposed to do." "What?" "Heal." She nodded. "Only family. Only bond." Caleb understood. The healing wasn't just physical. It meant something deeper. A bond. A soul link. "So now we're connected?" Zara hesitated, then looked at him more directly. "Now, I die if you die." Caleb was silent. He didn't know what to say. Part of him wanted to deny it, pull away. But the other part, the part that felt her warmth, her care, her sacrifice, was already bound her too. He reached out his hand. She took it. "Then I guess we better not die." The next hours were full of makeshift repairs. Caleb boarded up the windows. Zara cleaned the inside, gathering up what remained of the attackers. One of them still carried something, a translucent device, glowing with a soft blue pulse. Zara studied it with a serious expression. "They call more. Signal." Caleb took the device and tossed it into the fire. "Then no one's taking you. No one's calling reinforcements." She watched him for a long time, then said, "You protect, not because law." "What?" He shrugged. "Maybe because you're the first living thing that showed up in my life and didn't make me feel disgust or fear." She stepped closer. "You not fear me? Not anymore." Zara touched the scar on his shoulder, then rested her forehead against his, a gesture that was starting to become familiar. But this time, there was something more, a silence filled with promise. She whispered, "Now we run together." They didn't leave the cabin for 2 full days. 2 days where the world was just the fire, the snow-muted forest, and the space between them. Zara spoke little, Caleb even less. But their silences weren't uncomfortable anymore. She moved with more confidence now, her wounds nearly gone. Her violet hair, once dulled by exhaustion, now shimmered in the firelight as she passed. Caleb scrubbed the dry blood from the floor, and she helped. But every time their hands touched by accident, a jolt passed through both of them. On the 3rd night, the cold got worse. Caleb checked the thermometers and muttered a curse. "It's gonna freeze your damn soul tonight." Zara frowned. "Soul freeze? Yeah, like, even the part of you that wants to live wants to give up." She thought for a moment, then shook her head. "No, you, not freeze." And then, unexpectedly, she pulled a blanket from the bed and walked over to him. "You sleep. I stay." "No, you need rest." She met his eyes, then said softly, "We both sleep. Safe." The fire crackled. Orange light danced across the wooden floor. They lay down side by side on a pile of thick blankets. At first, there was space between them, a tense silence. Then, she moved closer, rested her head on his chest. Caleb didn't move. He could feel his heart pounding harder than he'd like to admit. Zahra traced the scar on his shoulder with her fingers, following its shape. Still hurt, only when you touch it like that. She paused, looked at him. Bad. He smiled. No, just strange. It's been a long time since someone touched me. Zahra looked at her own hand, then brought it back to his skin, firmer now. Touch is memory. Yeah, he murmured, and the body never forgets. That night, the heat didn't come just from the fire. Zahra slept curled up against him, her legs tangled with his. Violet hair spread across his bare chest. And Caleb, even without understanding how or why, felt something stirring. Something deeper than just desire. Her touch carried safety, care, and a buried sadness, like someone starved of affection for far too long. The next morning, she was waiting outside the cabin, wrapped in one of his blankets, hair loose, bare feet in the snow, as if she couldn't even feel the cold. She was looking at the sky. Caleb came out after her, rubbing the sleep from his eyes. "You're gonna freeze out here." "No, I remember." "Remember what?" She pointed upward. "My stars. Before gone." He looked too. Nothing but clouds. But she saw more than he did. "You different from my kind." "Yeah, I'm kind of a mess." Zahra looked at him, calmly, with something that might have been admiration, but warm. He stopped, fell silent, then smiled. "So are you." She took a step forward, touched his face, and then, for the first time, allowed herself to do what she'd been holding back from the very beginning. She pressed her lips softly to his cheek. A light touch, an alien gesture, but somehow strangely intimate. It wasn't a human kiss, but it was the start of something that defied biology. Night fell like a heavy curtain of darkness and ice. The cold wasn't just a detail anymore. It was a living threat. The temperature had plunged to dangerous levels, and even with the fire going and the windows sealed, the cabin shuddered with every gust of wind howling like a starving wolf outside. "This'll kill us if we stay still," Caleb muttered, eyes on the thermometer. Zahra stayed silent, pressed against the wall, wrapped in a blanket, her eyes fixed on the fire. But something in her posture had shifted like a decision was forming. She stood up. The blanket slipped off her shoulders, revealing a body already acclimated to the cabin's warmth. She traced something with her finger in the condensation on the glass window, then pointed outside, toward the shed. "Steam. Rock. Heat. You won't make a sauna?" She nodded. Caleb hesitated for a couple of seconds, then said, "You got a better idea?" It took hours. He insulated the old shed out back using blankets, foil, and plastic sheeting. He placed stones into an iron drum, lit a small fire inside, and slowly poured water over it until steam filled the air. Then shut the door. The heat began to rise. Outside, the world went still. Then they stepped in. Zahra was the first to remove her clothes. No hesitation, no shame. She stood in the steam, completely naked, her alien body slick with sweat. Her purple skin seemed alive, pulsing in deeper shades under the soft glow of the coals. The markings along her form, fine, spiral-like lines, as if her anatomy had been etched in living energy, shimmered faintly. Caleb held his breath. She turned to face him. There was no seduction in her eyes, only truth. A non-human body, but impossibly beautiful. Strong thighs, firm belly, small, symmetrical breasts with darker areolas, upright posture, a long neck, a body built to survive and feel. Caleb hesitated, then dropped his towel. Now they were the same, just two vulnerable beings stripped bare, wrapped in heat and steam. No weapons, no lies, no planets between them. Zahra stepped closer, slowly, like someone learning what closeness meant for the very first time. When her fingers touched his abdomen, Caleb shivered. "You tremble. I'm human. So feel." She guided her fingers up to his chest, to his heart. "Fast beat. Your fault." Zahra smiled. For the first time, she smiled like a woman who knew exactly what she was doing. She leaned her forehead against his. Steam dripped from the ceiling in thick drops. Caleb slid his hand around her waist, then up her back, feeling the heat of her skin, not hairy, not scaly, but smooth, vibrant like living silk. They looked at each other. Then she kissed him. It wasn't a gentle kiss. It was a rite, a collision of worlds. Zahra pulled him close, their bodies pressed together. Her breasts flattened against his chest. Their hips locked like two impossible puzzle pieces. Her tongue was hot, steady, learning his rhythm in real time. Caleb matched her. His hands roamed her curves, the weight of her body. She didn't retreat. She guided him. She showed him where to touch, when to press, when to pause. And she moaned, softly, alien, with a melody that had no translation, and made his blood catch fire. When she pushed him down onto the warm, damp wooden floor, he didn't resist. She straddled him. The heat between them was unreal, unrelenting, undeniable. She held his gaze as she slowly lowered herself onto him. No shame, no rush, just reverence. Her eyes shimmered the moment they became one. Her whole body pulsed. Her skin shifted color with every motion. She opened like some celestial bloom and let him in. This wasn't just sex. This was fusion. Hours later, they were still tangled together. The steam had faded, but the heat between them remained. Zara lay with her head on his chest, fingers tracing slow circles around the scar she had once healed. Caleb ran his hand through her damp hair. It sent a mix of minerals and ozone. She spoke, softly, like a confession. Might I not feel this? Not allow. You do now. She lifted her face. There were tears in her eyes, but she smiled. Now I know why humans fight for love. And Caleb, though he didn't say a word, understood. Because in that moment, he knew he'd fight the entire universe if it meant keeping her in his arms. Outside, the world was still a white, lethal desert. But in here, the air was warm. Not just from the steam that clung to the wooden walls, but for what had changed between them. Zara slept on Caleb's chest, her naked body covered only by a light blanket. The patterns on her skin had changed. Now, soft waves of light moved across her body like a second pulse, something she had kept hidden before. It was as if she had finally accepted her full form. Caleb gently ran his fingers through her hair, studying the delicate alien lines of her body. Every curve, every shadow, every glowing strand of bioluminescence that responded to his touch. She wasn't a stranger anymore. She was someone who had trusted him, given herself to him, and who now shared his fate. When she woke, there was no rush. Zara opened her eyes slowly, her face peaceful. When she saw him, she smiled, in a way Caleb still couldn't quite read. Was it tenderness, calm, love, or something older, something instinctual? She touched his face and spoke in her native tongue, a slow, rhythmic phrase. Esthar Kaliam Nor. What does that mean? He asked. She looked at him for a moment, then translated. The soul chose. The body followed. Caleb didn't respond with words. He kissed her forehead and pulled the blanket over them both. In the days that followed, the cabin became a real home. They rebuilt windows, sealed up holes, rearranged the furniture. She helped with everything, from chopping wood to rigging pieces of her broken ship into the generators. Things Caleb never thought would actually work. She drew a star map on the cabin floor. Her system, her moons, her paths. And she explained, more will come. To hunt you. She nodded. But not for me. For this. She pointed at Caleb's chest, where the scar still faintly glowed beneath his skin. A bond. Forbidden. They'd kill for that. She hesitated. Or isolate. Or study. Or erase. Caleb was silent for a moment, then said, then we run first. Zara blinked slowly, then took his hand. Not alone. Never again. That afternoon, Caleb built a makeshift radio using parts from her ship and some tech the invaders had left behind. Zara fine-tuned the frequencies until she caught a whisper. Tracking Unit 02, energy signature detected, mixed origin status, genetic anomaly. They looked at each other. They're close, Caleb murmured. Zara grabbed a supply pack. Caleb was already lacing up his boots. They didn't say goodbye to the cabin, because they both knew there might never be a safe place again. But somehow, that didn't matter as much anymore. Whatever was coming, they'd face it together. The sun barely brushed the tops of the frozen trees when Caleb woke up. Their shelter, a crude structure made from thermal tarp, branches, and stacked stone, creaked under the wind, but held strong. A small wood fire still burned low, casting trembling shadows on the patchwork fabric walls. Zara slept beside him. Her purple skin, once tight with fear and stress, now looked even-toned calm. Her body stayed warm against his, and her violet hair spilled over her bare shoulders like rivers of dyed silk. He watched her in silence for a long time, brushed the back of his hand across her cheek. It was strange how something so alien could feel so absolutely, right? Familiar. Like her body was a map he already knew, even if he'd never seen it before. When she opened her eyes, she didn't flinch. She just smiled, lips parted, eyes still heavy with sleep. "You watch me. Always." She leaned in, pressing her forehead to his, the way they did when words weren't enough. And in that gesture, there was as much intimacy as a kiss. Maybe more. That morning, they didn't run. They didn't hunt. They didn't hide. They simply existed. The routine of survival had given way to the rhythm of affection. Caleb washed clothes in a bucket warmed by the sun. Zara sorted edible roots from toxic ones, analyzing soil samples with sensors still working from the remnants of her capsule. And in the afternoon, they would sit atop the stone ledge overlooking the slope, watching the horizon. Below, forests and ice blended like unfinished paintings. And above, the sky revealed stars that were starting to look familiar to her. "There," Zara said, pointing with a fabric-wrapped finger. "My origin." Caleb followed her gaze. "You miss it." Zara thought for a moment, her expression distant, then answered, "Not the place, just what I thought it was." He nodded. That made sense. Sometimes we don't miss a place. We miss the idea of it. A home we maybe never really had. "And now," he asked, "what is this to you?" She looked around, then at him. She touched his face with her fingertips, then placed her hand over his chest, where the scar still glowed faintly beneath his skin. "Now this is where I feel alive." And that said everything. One night, when the cold crept in and the shelter seemed to shrink against the wind, Zara lay on top of him, tracing a path with her fingers from his shoulder down to his hip. "In my world, we touch only those chosen, the ones who could see inside." Caleb held his breath. "You chose me." She smiled, but her eyes were serious. Steady. "No, my soul chose. My body only followed." He closed his eyes. It hurt in a beautiful way, like hearing a song that reminded him of a kind of longing he couldn't name. "What happens if they find you again?" he asked. Zara lay down beside him. "They won't kill. They'll divide, cut, study, until I'm erased." "And are you afraid?" She paused, then said, "Not for me. For us." Silence settled between them, heavy, intimate. Caleb took her hand. "Then we keep going, however we can." He smiled softly. "We're good at winging it." She smiled back. "You're good at keeping me alive. And you made me want to stay alive." That hadn't happened in a long time. Zara kissed his scar. "You understand me?" "I do. Maybe more than any other human could." And deep down, they both knew it was true. They had touched something no species, no science could define. The place of the unspoken. On their last night before migrating, when they would decide whether to head south or stay hidden in the caves, Zara drew a symbol in the snow. It was circular, with 2 dots in the center, intertwined. "What is that?" "It's what we are now. Half me, half you. If it breaks, it's no longer whole." Caleb stared at the drawing until the snow slowly erased it. She turned to him. "If they come, we fight." "We fight," he said. "If they separate us, I'll find you again." She nodded, then whispered, "You saw me naked in the sauna. Now you see my soul." Caleb pulled her into his arms. There, in the middle of a world that never cared they existed, 2 beings as different as possible decided that the impossible was exactly what they wanted to live. 2 months later, the world was still frozen, but they weren't. The journey had been brutal, storms, trackers, nights with no shelter. But neither of them turned back. Zara had changed, stronger, more centered, and Caleb too, leaner, sharper, but with a new light in his eyes. Something no trauma had been able to extinguish. Now, in front of a frozen lake in northern Washington, they had done the unthinkable. Built a home, small, hidden among tall pines, with solar panels salvaged from shipwreckage, a neat pile of firewood by the entrance, and a low, sturdy structure built to survive winter. Inside, everything was different now. There was no space left for doubt, just the 2 of them, and a new language they had created, made of touches, glances, simple gestures, and silences that spoke more than words ever could. That night, Caleb sat by the fire, writing in a notebook. Zara watched him from across the room, wrapped in a blanket, her hair loose like purple curtains over her shoulders. The firelight made her skin glow in soft, warm tones. She smiled at what he was doing. "You write story?" "Yeah," he said. "Ours." "Why?" Caleb thought for a moment. Then he answered, "Because someday, someone's going to find this. And maybe they'll think they were so different. But I want them to know we were the same in the one thing that matters." Zara furrowed her brow, curious. "What thing?" He looked at her and smiled. "The ability to love." Outside, the northern lights danced across the sky. Zara stepped out barefoot into the snow. Her body, wrapped in steam like that night in the sauna, shimmered under the stars. Caleb followed, and the two of them stood together beneath an impossible sky. Slowly, she raised her arms. The natural markings on her skin began to glow, and for the first time, she sang. A song from somewhere ancient. Not sad, not joyful, just true. The song of someone who found a home inside another soul. Caleb took her hand, and there, in the middle of snow, silence, and forever, they danced. If you rooted for this impossible love, leave a comment below. Like, share, and subscribe, because the universe is full of stories like this one, just waiting to be told.